Thank you, Terry, and the Project D3 team. We're very excited to be here today. And as we're getting started up, we just want to let you know we'll be your guides for this afternoon. We'll be talking in regards to, next slide please, we'll be talking about how VR can serve veterans with mental health issues. And myself, I'm Randy Loss. I'm with the Pennsylvania Office of Mental Health. And my background is I was the Veterans Coordinator for VR Services for about 10 years for the State VR Agency before coming to the Office of Mental Health. And I've been in the VR field for about 30 years now. So, Kimberly?
So my name is Kimberly Gerlach. I'm also working for PA VR. I'm a program specialist working with policies and procedures. And I've been with the state for about 7.5 years now. I also do consulting work, and I'm also a mental health first aid instructor, well, actually a youth mental health first aid instructor.
And what we're going to do today, our objectives for our presentation is we're going to learn about mental health issues that affect veterans. We're going to define mental health issues that affect veterans. We're going to learn briefly about other VR issues that tie into a veteran and mental health issue, and you'll see that as we talk through the conversation this afternoon. And lastly, we'll learn about resources to provide services to veterans specifically with mental illness. Next slide. So Terry, if you could pull the poll question up for us, we're going to take a moment and we're going to find out what role do you play in your profession, and we want to get a sense of who's out there so we know who our audience is. So we'll take about 30 to 45 seconds. And it looks like the large number is VR counselors at the state level. So thank you, Terry. Can we share that with everybody so they can see the results? Okay, thank you. So there are professionals from across the board, but we see most of the VR counselors from the state level in the conversation. So we're glad you're with us today. We see VR and e-counselors at the federal level. Again, thank you for being here, and mental health professionals and the other professionals all play an important role in working with veterans. So that helps us to know who you are, and hopefully we can walk you through resources that have been made available to us and that we use, Kimberly uses currently in her role as a VR lead for veteran services in the state VR agency. So next slide, please. And click the X. Okay, what we have listed here is what's called the Warrior's Creed, and that's from military.com, and it basically states that Army, National Guard, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, and Navy all have creeds, so basically every branch of the military. A creed is an oath or saying that provides a value structure by which to live or work by. Creeds then set the tone of life in each service. If you join one of these branches, you'll need to learn its creed. And the reason we wanted to bring this up is because it's kind of an unwritten rule as well in regards to, the warrior ethos, being self-sufficient, being independent, learning how to defend against oneself. So these are skills that are very important in the role that veterans play while they're in the military, in regards to being able to defend our country and being able to know what to do if they're separated from their other soldiers. How do they react? What are they trained to do? So it's about self-sufficiency and independence. So again, these are good skill sets to have while you're in the military, but sometimes these can maybe cause some crosswires to occur for veterans as they transition from the military into society, and also on top of having mental health disabilities. This can sometimes be a challenge for veterans as they move forward. So we'll talk more about that in some later slides. Next slide.
So some definitions that we're going to go through for today's presentation, the first one being traumatic or other brain injuries. Basically, this is just going to be some sort of disruption in the brain. It could be caused by a bump, it could be caused by a blow to the head or a jolt to the head, or something that penetrates the brain. post-traumatic stress disorder or other mental health issues. That's just somebody experiencing some sort of trauma in their life, witnessing something. And so then therefore you're going to see symptoms of possible flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety in somebody with PTSD. We're also going to talk about substance use and addictions. Just that reoccurrent use of some sort of a substance, whether it be legal or illegal, alcohol, cannabis, opiates. So we'll talk about those. That's going to interfere or impact your daily functioning. We're also going to talk about today about visual and hearing disabilities. Yes, this is a session on mental health, but as we go through the presentation, you're going to see how with this population, this vision and hearing is going to tie in very significantly to our veteran population. So vision is any type of loss of your vision. It can be low vision also, and the vision could be due to a disease. It could be due to trauma. Sometimes it's congenital, sometimes it's degenerative conditions. Your hearing, that could be a conductive, it could be a sensorineural, it could be a mix of both. Aging and chronic exposure to loud noises both contribute to hearing losses. And then we're also going to talk about suicide today. And that's just the intentionally of one taking their own life. So traumatic brain injuries or other brain injuries. So our military, they are constantly at risk for brain injuries. They experience them during combat. They experience them during their training exercises. Some of those cognitive symptoms of TBIs, they have a decreased memory. Sometimes they have concentration, attention. It also affects their executive functioning. And that's something that as counselors, we just need to be very aware of, because when you're talking about the impact of your executive functioning, they're going to have issues setting goals. They're going to have issues processing information. They're going to have issues planning, organizing, being able to prioritize things, problem solving, judgment, decision making, and being flexible. So anytime that they're like looking for a job, like these are all the skills that you need to be able to find a job. So as a counselor, this can become very frustrating because they're not planning, they're not writing things down, they're not seeing things, but that's our job to help them through that. They can't help it when they have a traumatic brain injury. We need to give them the skills to be able to overcome that. Some of the emotional or behavioral symptoms that you're going to see with the TBIs is it's going to be tied in with post-traumatic stress disorder. It's going to be tied in with depression and anxiety. Some behavioral things that you're going to see is irritability. You're going to see aggression and withdrawal. And they're going to have poor impulse control. Some of the physical symptoms that you're going to see is vision loss and hearing loss. And that's where this piece comes in with mental health with our veterans. Is some of those physical symptoms that are tied to this. They could have headaches, seizures, sometimes motor or sensory dysfunction. Another interesting one is that they could have a loss of smell or taste. And they may have an inability to communicate the way that they used to. So these are just all things that we need to be aware of with our veterans with traumatic brain injuries.
Before we go on, if I may, Kimberly, also too, one thing that I've learned about traumatic brain injury is the fact that it's kind of like a cracked foundation in a house. Once the first brain injury has occurred, the person is 9 times more likely to have another brain injury. So one thing we need to keep in mind too is, we don't want to have the individual potentially get into a situation where we're going to have more concussive issues in regards to going further down that slippery slope of brain injury. Because one thing, again, is it's knowing the understanding of what brain injury is and what is the causation of it and how it's going to affect the veteran long term. That's going to be critical. So being able to help veterans in this regard and deal with issues of brain injury, I think are very important. And just one last comment, I'm sorry. But I think too, well, I was thinking as Kimberly was talking, another issue too is I think that the military has got much better at diagnosing brain injury. In many cases, it may have been not diagnosed properly because the professionals that were diagnosing were not trained to look for brain injury. They were seeing as mental health, disassociative behaviors and whatnot. And it was indeed a chemical change of the brain, and that chemical change actually changed their personality. The physical property of the brain had been changed. So I just want to throw those couple things out there. So thank you.
And that's true, because somebody with a TBI, they are going to be at a greater risk or higher rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, depressive disorder, or substance use disorders, anxiety disorders than somebody without a traumatic brain injury. So you're going to see layers of mental health going on with our veteran population. So next, we're going to talk about the post-traumatic stress disorder and some of the symptoms. So one of the things that you're going to see is the intrusive memories. They're going to be reoccurrent. They're going to be unwanted memories. They're going to keep reliving that traumatic event. They're going to have dreams and nightmares. The avoidance, they're going to try to avoid thinking about it. They're going to avoid talking about it. They could possibly avoid activities or places that remind them of the traumatic event that they've been through. Randy and I were talking earlier about environmental, and like just even, not even in the military, but when they come out of the military, of hearing a car backfire. So that can be, they've been in the military for so long, and so it's not even happening while they're in the military. It's also transitioning out into that civilian world, and they're still, they hear those loud noises, and it still startles them, and they're still traumatized by it. So it would be nothing to hear backfire and somebody, duck behind a car. That's part of the nature of it. So they're going to have negative changes to the thinking and negative changes in the mood. They're going to feel helpless. They're going to have negative thoughts. They're going to have memory problems. They're going to feel detached from family and friends sometimes. Lack of interest in activities, something maybe that they once enjoyed. They're going to have difficulty expressing positive emotions. Changes in physical and emotional reactions. They're, just like we were just talking about, they're going to be easily startled. So to walk up behind somebody that has PTSD, that's a veteran, and touching them on the shoulder, I mean, they could possibly jump out of their skin. You just don't want to startle them, and so maybe not approaching them from behind and approaching them, from forward so that they can see you coming. They're always going to be on guard.
Well, and I was thinking as you were talking, they've been trained to be on guard, and the challenges that they're facing, coupled with the post-traumatic stress disorder that they're having, it can be a toxic mix, not just for themselves, but for the people around them. So being aware that PTSD exists in a veteran's life, and that the challenges that they may face in regards to it being not monitored, or not, he or she's not getting assistance from a medical professional in terms of dealing with it, could be a toxic mix for the individual.
Yeah, so and some of the things you may see is self-destructive behavior, such as excessive drinking or driving too fast. Maybe some of those changes that you're going to see. Trouble sleeping, irritability and outbursts are some of the other things that you're going to see in the symptoms. So post-traumatic stress disorder and some of the resources, just a statistic out there, in 2011, there was 476,515 veterans that had a primary or a secondary diagnosis of PTSD, and that they received treatment from the VA. So a post-traumatic stress disorder is going to be something we all have a tendency to have witnessed or been in some sort of scenario, or we've had an event in our life that was traumatic. But usually over time, and with maybe some self-care, we're able to move on and move past that. Where it becomes the post-traumatic stress disorder is it's lasting for months, or it could possibly be lasting for years. That's when you really need to get concerned, and that somebody's not able to come out on the other side of it with some good mental health. It's going to definitely interfere with their day-to-day actions and their day-to-day functioning. In some of your older veterans, you may hear them refer to it as soldier's heart. They could refer to it as having shell shock or combat fatigue. So those could be some other terminologies that you've heard or could possibly hear from one of your veterans. So Wounded Warrior Project, this is very interesting, and I have to admit that I didn't realize this until I started doing some research. I always thought Wounded Warrior Project had always been around, but in all actuality, Wounded Warrior Project is something that came out of 9/11. It actually was to help warriors that were either physically or mentally injured. They had some sort of illness, or they were wounded after 9/11, on or after 9/11. And so it does provide supports to our warriors. And one of the things that, and we've noted here, that they do provide is peer support groups. And you heard us, we'll talk about peer supports again here in a few more slides, but you also heard us talk about peer supports and the good, it's a very good service, and we wanted to bring it up again here. One of the other things that's helpful with people with PTSD in the military is service animals. They really help the military men and women with their confidence. They make them feel safe. So this is just something for you to be aware of.
Can I I just want to throw in a side note in regards to service animals. We had talked about this as we were preparing for the presentation. Big box chain home improvement company. We won't mention any names, but I read about this story. It was in a national paper. It was a great story, and it was about a veteran who had PTSD and had a service animal. And the gentleman went in, had the job interview with the home improvement company, and they said, "We want to hire you, but we also want to hire your dog." So the picture that was shown in the article was the back of the gentleman standing at the cash register and his service dog standing also next to the service register, but they both had a vest on. So they said that the dog had to wear its vest. If it were going to be working alongside him, it would have to wear its vest. So I think that there's definitely some positives that are coming from service animals. And again, you're seeing a lot more stores saying that they're animal friendly these days. So it wouldn't be out of the question to have a veteran who has a service animal, to have that animal at their side when they're working. So I think that it's becoming more common in society, more acceptable in society. So that's something that maybe you want to think about in regards to, that connection with a service animal can actually help the individual survive PTSD and help them save their life, because that service animal is just like, the buddy that you had when you were in the military. This is their new buddy to help them through thick and thin. I know that I had a friend who had a service animal, and I'm sorry I didn't talk about this before, but the animal would sense when he started getting anxious. So if he were in a mall and he started getting anxious, the dog had been trained to notice that and to kindly, politely walk him out of the mall so that he could calm down. And he said that had happened many times. And service animals can be lifesavers for veterans with PTSD. So there are a lot of neat programs out there. Kim will talk about that later, but I just wanted to throw that out there that service animals can be a lifesaver for the veteran with PTSD.
And there's, I don't know if any of you know out there, but Purdue University has O'Hare Lab, and they do train service animals for veterans. It's a very interesting program if anybody's interested in looking at that. But the mindfulness meditation, the military has actually been doing a lot of research on this. In 2015, actually the Minneapolis VA did a program where they took 58 veterans that had PTSD. They provided them 9 sessions of mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy. And it really had a really good outcome with them and reduced their PTSD symptoms. So just one of those research things. And in the resources, there is it's research.va.gov. So a lot of the subjects that we're going to be talking about today in the different mental health areas, the VA has done a lot of research, and it was very interesting to read on some of that. So just so you guys know that that's out there. So this is where we come into the visual and hearing. So approximately about 130,000 veterans in the United States are legally blind. And more than 1 million veterans have low vision that was a cause of loss of ability to perform their daily activities. 64% of service members with traumatic brain injuries also have a vision problem. So I just want to bring this to your attention. So if you're working with a veteran that may have some sort of vision, low vision or blind, really look and ask questions. With the fact that there's 64% of them out there that may have a TBI, there could be a possibility that they have a TBI that they've never disclosed. So making sure that you realize that the two could very closely be related, or you could be working with somebody that has a TBI and maybe they haven't disclosed that there's a vision issue there. So just something to look at and be aware of as you're working with the veteran population. And I did see that some of you do work with the federal VA, VRNE, but for those of you that are state VRE, or state VR, just so you're aware, there are 13 blind rehabilitation centers that the VA operates. Those are actually residential facilities that work at rehabbing the veterans. They also have 22 intermediate and advanced low vision clinics and 23 advanced ambulatory low vision clinics. So the VA has a lot of resources for the veterans that have vision impairments. Hearing is one of the largest services that the VA does provide. They also provide hearing aids to veterans. I know my ex-father-in-law got his hearing aids through the VA. And so not only do they provide the hearing aids, but they also supplied him with his batteries. He never had to buy batteries. So the VA does provide a lot of good services to the vets. Another statistic in 2014, there was almost 1 million veterans that were receiving some sort of military compensation for a hearing loss. And 1.3 were receiving services for tinnitus. I found this very interesting because many veterans, they may score normal on an auditory test, but they have difficulty understanding speech. Found it very interesting, and it's called auditory processing disorder. And I know some of you may have heard of that, but it's often associated with blast exposure. So I found that just really interesting. And again, with our veterans, all of this is so intertwined and so mixed. Like it's with our veterans, you really can't separate this stuff. It's just, it's all compact, and one weaves into the other and out of the other one. I mean, there's just really no way to kind of separate this. It's one big, huge package deal with our veterans.
Well, I think too, before you move on to the next slide, it kind of comes back to the Warriors Creed that we talked about at the beginning. You know, the individual's taught to be self-sufficient. The individual's taught to be independent. The individual's taught to be creative in their thinking and resolving issues. Just imagine you have this training and you've lost your hearing, you've lost your sight, you have a brain injury, you have a back injury. Those are going to be things that are going to affect your functioning, your mental well-being, and it's going to challenge your mental well-being. So that's one of the reasons why we had listed visual and hearing disabilities, traumatic brain injury, because many of those things, there's intersection, you know, they connect. There's, like Kimberly said, it's almost like a spider's web where, you know, the veteran is in the center, but as you go out, you start pulling on a string, it moves a bunch of other strings around it. So keep that in mind when you're working with a veteran, that if there are those types of issues, there's brain injury, there's hearing loss, there's visual loss, there's likely some mental illness as well. There's some challenges, PTSD. So as she said, it is can be a very deep issue with the veteran in regards to helping them find their path towards being whole again.
Yeah, it's a very holistic approach that we need to take with our veterans. You're not going to be dealing with just one issue. There's going to be a multitude of issues.
And substance abuse and addiction, no question, it has substantial negative consequences. Complicates other conditions. What we just listed, the visual, the traumatic brain injury, the hearing, the mental illness. If a person is using substances, is using alcohol, for example, or harder substances, illicit drugs, to deal with their mental illness, to deal with the pain that maybe the brain injury is causing in their body, to deal with the grief of loss of function, for those that are familiar with what that means, like as you lose the ability, like you're in a wheelchair because you were in a car wreck. There's a process you have to go through in terms of being able to grieve through that and come out the other end without being bitter about it. So that veteran may very well be bitter, very well be in that one of the 5 stages of the grief of loss of function, and they're using medications, they're using alcohol to deal with those issues. And it doesn't help it, it exacerbates it. Now the good news is with doctors working in the VAs with veterans, and you know, this has become a national issue in the opioid crisis that had been, and it's still going on, you know, since 2014, and likely even earlier. The amount of opioids prescribed is declining. Doctors are being held accountable. Pharmaceutical companies are being held accountable. So the good news is opioids are being prescribed less and less. You know, doctors aren't just throwing scripts at individuals and letting them just take these opioids. Because again, we need to look at the needs of the individual as opposed to ending the pain or resolving an equation, as it were. We need to look at the individual and not use the medical model when we're looking at what is in the best interest of the individual. So also too, along with that, the non-opioid medication is being prescribed to help individuals deal with pain in a different way, in a less traditional way, a less medical model, to help the veteran be able to come back to the land of the living, as I like to call it, in regards to, you know, you did your service, you served your country, you were trained in a certain methodology, you got wounded while you were in the military. Now, how can we help you find your path back to society? How can we help you find your path back to who you were before the military, and help you be as independent as possible, but being able to ask for help when you need it? Because again, getting back to the Warriors Creed, you help yourself, Or if someone needs help, it's usually the other person, not yourself. So how do you help the individual? Just like the guidepost we have at the bottom of the picture. How do you help the individual develop their own guidepost? How do you help the individual realize that they do need help? And it's okay to ask for help. there's nothing wrong, there's no shame in asking for help. So we want to help the person walk back to the land of the living and walk out of these dark places that substance abuse and addiction has created for these individuals, on top of the multiple disabilities they may have. So next slide. We also want to talk about prevention of suicide. What we have listed here are some resources for you in regards to if you are talking to a veteran and they're ideating suicide, they're talking about wanting to end their life. Here's the Veterans Crisis Line that's listed, both the telephone number and a text number. And also to just be aware that all 145 VA hospitals across the United States have suicide prevention coordinators. So if you're not already hooked in with your closest VA hospital and you're aware of who that suicide prevention coordinator is, or coordinators plural are, reach out to them, find out who these individuals are so that you have that additional resource. Because again, one life ended by suicide is one too many. How do we help veterans maintain their dignity, deal with the demons that they may have because of the challenges that they face due to disability, due to what they experienced in the military, due to what they experienced maybe in a war zone? How do we help them stay solid? How do we help them stay sane? How do we help them not say, hey, this is too much pain, I want to end my life? How do we help them prevent suicide? So these are resources that we have. Also too, in Pennsylvania, many other states, I think it's 13 or 14 states across the country, have taken a governor's challenge to end veteran suicide. So we've doubled up our efforts in Pennsylvania to reduce veteran suicide, to get them help when they need it, to look for signs, to get resources out there and available to veterans so that they're not ending their life early. Also too, there's mayor's challenge. So many cities across the United States also have the mayor's challenge to end veteran suicide. So if you hear that, find out more about that in your state, find out more about that in your city, because it's a good resource. There's a lot of effort that's being put towards reducing those numbers, because one life is too many when it comes to suicide. So we also want to talk about that look for the signs. Be familiar with what the signs are that a veteran may be saying, hey, I need help. If I don't get the help, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a long-term solution to a short-term issue. How can we make sure that this doesn't happen? Be familiar with what the signs are, be familiar with what the issues are, so that you know how to address it. And if you don't know how to address it, find out what the resources are in your community to help deal with suicide, so that you have some numbers you can turn to, that you can make sure that referral is made, you can make sure that the person gets the needed help. Again, I'm overemphasizing this because this is a serious issue, and we don't want to continue losing veterans by suicide. So do what you can, be familiar with what you are. One last thought, there's the question, persuade, and refer, the QPR training. Again, it's a training that you want to look for if you can get it. It isn't making you an expert in suicide prevention of suicide, excuse me, but it is helping you know, okay, what do I need to know about what they're saying to me? Is what they're saying to me a danger zone? Is what I need to do getting them referred to appropriate counselors that can take them to the next step and deal with the issue in an appropriate way, in a way that's therapeutic and helping the individual pull away from that ledge. So question, persuade, refer. Again, I will make sure that information is provided to you. It's not in the resource guide currently at the end of the slides, but I will make sure that you get information on QPR as it's known. Next slide, please.
So just real quick.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sure.
CDC, the statistics, there was 42,773 suicides in 2014 in the U.S. That's about 117 suicides each day, and about 18% of those who die by suicide are veterans.
And again, as the numbers in general are too many. Next slide, please. Okay.
So criminal justice. So when a veteran first breaks the law, that should be like a red flag for us, that there could be some unaddressed problems. So that's why they've set up some veteran treatment courts, is to really try to divert our veterans, because usually it's a mental health or a substance abuse issue that's going on. And so the veteran treatment courts really try to do a more of a therapeutic approach and try to keep them in the community versus putting them in the state prisons. So that's the purpose of the veterans treatment courts, is to try to keep them out of that. If it's a serious offense, if it's violent or it's a sexual in nature, unfortunately they're not going to be able to stay in the veterans courts, because it will only take the lower crimes.
Do you mind if I jump in? Yeah. Just this one, you can take the rest of the slide, but veteran treatment courts have been brought out of what are called diversionary courts, and there are, I believe, 32 diversionary courts, or 32 counties within Pennsylvania, 67 counties, the number is growing, of diversionary programs. So it can be mental health, it can be drug abuse, it can be disability related, but also ones that are veterans. And what these programs are intended to do, the reason they're called treatment courts is they're intended to be diversionary, meaning that it doesn't get them deeper into the criminal justice system, but it diverts them towards a pathway out. Now, there are some that are pre-trial and some that are post-trial. And my preference personally is the pre-trial treatment courts, because what happens is if the veteran appears before the judge pre-trial, the charge that's brought against them is if they complete the treatment court way and they follow everything they're supposed to do, there's a graduation, they get a certificate saying that they completed the treatment court, and the charge is dropped. That, to me, for folks that know about working with people with criminal records in general, that is crucial, because if they don't have that criminal record on if they don't have that criminal charge or conviction on their record, it's much easier for them to become employed. So that's a critical factor. Now, the treatment courts that are post-trial, now, the person still has a charge, but rather than go to jail, the treatment program is what they do instead of being in jail. So at least it keeps them in the community. At least it helps them to stay connected to community resources. But my preference is the pretrial ones, because it allows individuals to, upon successful completion of the program, not have that charge dropped, So I just wanted to say that, Kimberly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
carry on.
It's definitely a good thing if they can go through the treatment courts versus, the regular incarceration route. But if they, for some reason, do end up into that incarceration route, a lot of your state correctional facilities are going to have special housing units for our veterans, and they're going to be able to provide them those specialized services for their substance abuse or their mental health or whatever that they're having. So just like looking at that or knowing that, I know here in PA we do have a whole unit that's specialized for veterans, and they're all housed in one area. There's crisis intervention training. There's mental health first aid, and the mental health first aid, that's actually the adult mental health first aid. Here in Pennsylvania, we had all of our correctional officers trained in adult mental health first aid, and to teach them, like Randy was saying, about those warning signs of suicide, because it's very high in our prison systems. So at least the correctional officers knew all the signs and symptoms of seeing somebody before they were able to commit suicide. Just knowing that that's out there. There's also a special certification for people that are adult mental health first aid certified. There's actually a veterans mental health first aid course so any of you that are out there that are veterans, there is that available, just to learn about those warning signs of somebody with mental health issues. So mental health versus the military culture. In the military, there definitely is a hierarchy of who's in charge and things. They definitely have a language of their own. People always talk about our alphabet soup, like just even between, in our world of, mental health, or like even with vocational rehabilitation, like we have our own alphabet soup. So we're always using acronyms, we're always using abbreviations. And I know even though some of us may not be in the military, we all have a tendency to use their
slang.
Their communication. Like, how many of you have ever spelled something to somebody like cat, and you go Charlie Alpha Tango? I mean, that's military, but I mean, even as civilians, we do it. But so they have a language of their own. And when you're in combat, like, a lot of times they don't even use words to verbalize things. A lot of times it could be a hand signal, it could be head nods. So they can communicate without even using words, because when you're in combat, you can't yell to somebody, to do something. You're going to be identified. So like I said, they have a language of their own.
And there's consequences for not following orders.
Yeah, it goes into that hierarchy. They're very loyal. It's a very tight-knit community, and they have to be. They protect each other. They're loyal to their family and to their friends. They protect each other. They're very mission-driven. When they're doing something, they're on a mission, and they don't stop until that mission is complete. That's just their culture. Back to a few slides ago, here we're talking about stigma. And Randy was talking about suicide a few slides ago. There was actually a research that was done in 2015 up in the Portland VA Center. And they looked at, back from 2009, they looked at the military that had received VA healthcare in the last previous 12 months before the veteran had died. And they were also receiving mental health services, and they looked at that, and they looked to see how many of those vets had been asked whether they were suicidal, and they all said that they hadn't been. And this goes to that whole stigma of disclosing that you're feeling suicidal, or you're feeling that you want to harm or hurt you feel that you're weak. So there's a huge stigma with our veteran population of admitting to that, or saying something to get help before you actually go forward with that act of taking your own life. So.
Well, and I'm looking too, just as this picture just depicts a bunch of veterans, both male and female, working together, but you notice they're wearing the same uniforms, wearing the same boots. The women have their hair pulled back. So it isn't about fashion, folks, but it's about function. And folks don't want to not fit in. They want to be a part. If they're a part of the whole, their unit, their platoon, whatever is dependent upon them, they're dependent upon their platoon. So they want to fit in. They need to fit in. It's not just a desire, but it's a need for them to fit in, to be able to function just like the rest of the soldiers around them. Shoot a gun, pick up a person, as you see here, carry a 50-pound, 100-pound backpack. So there's a need. And when people look like or feel like they're perceived as being different than that collective, they don't want to. They want to fit in. It's a need for them to fit in. So it's seen as a stigma to be different from fitting in. Sorry.
Yeah, no, so our military population may not seek the mental health services that they could possibly need. So we just need to be aware of that and be cognizant of it to be able to help them when we see these issues that are rising.
Now, the VA peer specialist. We talked earlier today about the certified peer specialist, how it's an individual who's had mental illness in their life. They're now in the process of recovery, or the certified recovery specialist, someone who has had addiction in their life, and they're also in recovery. Now, one person could be both a mental health peer specialist and a substance abuse peer specialist. But in the case of the VA peer specialist, it's an individual who's had mental illness challenges in the past. Likely they may have had substance abuse issues in the past as well. Statistically, it's very highly possible. But all 148 of the VA hospitals around the country have bought into the concept of the VA peer specialist. So somebody who has had the lived experience, they have the military culture, they understand where the person is coming from, they understand why the person might not want to reach out for help because they were there themselves at one point. And they're a role model. They help the veteran goal set and problem solve. They help the veteran empower and advocate. They help the veteran to understand that it's okay to ask for help. You know, you served your country, now let your country serve you. You served your country, now let the VA provide the supports that you now need because we want to help you be whole again. We want to help you as best possible, be on a path of recovery, both from a mental health perspective, from the substance abuse perspective, if that's also part of the veteran's background, but also too, if there's any physical disabilities, how do you deal with that change in your body's function? Because you were once vibrant, healthy, you were kicking butt, taking names, that kind of thing. Now you're maybe in a wheelchair. That changes your psyche, your mental well-being, your warrior's creed. How do you wrap yourself around that? A VA peer specialist is a really good resource to help address many of those issues. Now, they're not the answer, end-all be-all, but they're a great resource. They're not a counselor, not a case manager, but they're somebody that can come alongside the veteran in an organic way and say, brother, sister, I've been there. I can help you. Here's where I was. Here's where I am now. Let's walk this path together. So it's a great program. Again, become familiar with the veteran peer, find out who they are in your area, what they, the names of the veterans peers from the hospital, the VA hospitals near you. So great resource. Definitely you want to get a VA peer if there's mental health or substance abuse issues. You definitely want to get a VA peer hooked up with the veterans you're working with.
And I just love that saying at the bottom, in wounded times, no veteran fights alone.
Right.
Just love
Thank
that.
you. Now, schooling. We have, veterans have the GI Bill. They can take those monies that they received from being in the military and use that towards their schooling, which is definitely a good resource. But helping them understand the ins and outs of the GI Bill and how it's to be used is something that a VR counselor, VR&E counselor can help the veteran understand so that they're being as judicious and mindful as possible with the monies they have available and making sure that it's going towards a degree that's going to help them get, transfer back into society and be something that is meaningful, to them as a person and in the future as a professional. And transferable skills. Again, military veterans, military personnel have learned a lot of great skills, real world life skills while they're in the military. And how can you take what they learned in their role in the military and transfer that over? So again, if you have the brain injury, you have the PTSD, you have the mental illness, you have the visual or sensory issues, you have the plethora of those issues facing a veteran, they might not have the foresight to see what those transferable skills are. So be willing to sit down and work with a veteran and help them look at what could be transferable skills to help them be able to be successful in schooling and their future endeavors in the world of work. And again, there's multiple funding sources. Kimberly will talk in the next slide about VR&E and the difference between the federal program, the VR&E, and the state VR program. And keep in mind that while one program might be able to pay for transportation and travel, they might not be able to pay for schooling or books, whereas the other program can pay for schooling and books, but they can't pay for transportation. So having the veteran seek as many possible funding sources in regard, and grants, there are a ton of grants, like Wounded Warriors and other programs that are like that are out there to help veterans be successful in their future endeavors and successful moving forward in their future, for their future and their independence, excuse me. We want to be able to find those multiple funding sources and be aware of what they are and where they are. And I don't have things listed simply because there are a lot of different grants out there for veterans, but also too, the VR and VRE program can work together to develop a good funding package along with the GI Bill for veterans. So next slide, please.
So Veterans Administration versus vocational rehabilitation. So as we've said, VRE is Veterans Readiness and Employment. And then you have your state vocational rehabilitation. In 2018, there was more than 1.7 million veterans that received treatment through a VA mental health specialty program. So that's a lot of veterans that are receiving services. The VA definitely offers a wide range of mental health services. They offer a wide range of services to the veterans. The VRE, specifically that program, it's very similar to the state vocational rehabilitation program in the fact that they are helping with employment. They're helping the veteran to do job training, helping them develop their resume, helping them with job seeking skills. They can help them with starting up their own business and like working with them for independent living services so that they can be independent and on their own versus, you know, being homeless. Because so many of our veterans end up being homeless. But there's a lot of resources out there to keep them from being homeless and being able to work. And like Randy was just saying, you know, like the state vocational rehabilitation services won't pay for transportation, but that's something that VRE can pay for. I know here in Pennsylvania, our state vocational rehabilitation will pay for books and stuff for the veteran where, you know, for schooling, where VRE, they don't. So like Randy said, utilizing both services for a veteran so that they have that full package and that full, I'm going to use this term, but it's not, for that whole wraparound of services, like they're that holistic approach. So I think that both agencies have so much to offer the veterans, and that, you know, there should be them involved with both of us. Yeah, the combination in order to serve them and get them all of the services that they need. Anything else? Because that's now we're questions.
And we'll turn it over to, I can't remember, I think it was Jennifer. We're going to do the Q&A, or whoever was capturing the Q&A. So
it's me again. All right. So we have a couple questions so far in the Q&A box, but other people feel free to chime in. Usually the Q&A is either at the bottom or the top of your screen, and you can type your questions in there. First question.
And just a side note.
Yeah.
Just a side note, we slide it through to, there were the resource page and a reference page. So if folks want to refer to or look at the resources that we had mentioned, they're in the presentation, built into the presentation. So.
Perfect. Yeah, and Jen has shared a link in the chat box for those slides. So if people want to check out the slides, then they can get those links for the resources and things. All right. Our first question is, are you aware of any data regarding organic mental health epidemiology among those who enter / exit the military?
Say the last part of that, Beth.
Yeah. I'll just say the whole thing again. Are you aware of any data regarding organic mental health epidemiology among those entering or exiting the military?
I don't specifically know of research, but here, let me back up on this one slide. Oh, It's on the
Okay.
references.
The research.
Yeah, this www.research.va.gov/topics. Just about every single topic that we talked about, there is VA research going on. So if somebody is interested into that organic, I would highly suggest that they go on that website to look to see what research is being done out there.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Next question comes from Sandra. Says, I understood that it was hard for a veteran to prove the hearing loss came from their military service and therefore were not eligible for hearing aids. Has that changed?
I didn't know that they had to prove that it was due to their
Military service.
military service. I know that that's just a service that the VA provides to a veteran, period, is that they're eligible for audiology evaluations, and if there's a hearing loss, that they can get hearing aids.
Well, and I think it's kind of a mixed question, because I know that, you know, as a person, as a veteran leaves the military, if they have any kind of disability, you know, the VA will, or the VA will say you have 30% disability, you have 60% disability, some cases 100% disability. So I know that there's some kind of formula in regards to how that plays out, but in regards to answering that question, I don't know the connection between that level, that designation of disability, and what the VA may or may not pay for. So I want to tend to say that what Kimberly's saying is correct. I mean, if they're getting, you know, they're a veteran and they're going to the VA for their medical services and whatnot, there shouldn't be, to my knowledge, there shouldn't be any issue in regards to hearing aids. So I'm not aware, sounds like Kimberly's not aware in regards to what would be some kind of distinction about disability.
Proving that it was, proving that it
you know,
was.
some level of disability, proving that they need hearing aids, you know, so.
Like I had said in the presentation, I know my father-in-law got them, and I mean, I was with him to most of his doctor's appointments, and I don't ever remember having to prove that it was
Service related.
Yeah, service related. They just did the hearing test and provided, I mean, the only other thing I can think of is that maybe it had to do with age.
And that's possible too. So it might be, yeah, it might be a combination of disability and age. Again, I don't know the answer. We don't know the answer to that specific question. We'll research it and get back.
Sounds good. And I'm hoping maybe the case is that just has changed over time, and that's why you guys haven't heard of it. Okay, next question. Would our local VA facilities know where to send a veteran if they don't have the services they need at that facility?
Say that one more time, please.
Would local VA facilities know where to send a veteran if they didn't have the services they need at that facility? So I think just wondering if veteran VAs have good referral programs.
Right. I would think that their internal referral system would take care of that. So if locally a person needs, say, physical therapy, but it's not available, they'd either send them, I know that again, there's a lot of dynamics changing in regards to if a veteran wants to go to a local doctor, there's supposedly that ability. So, you know, the dust is still settling on that. So my response to that would be, they would make the referral to another VA center, but with the new Veterans Administration, there likely would be the possibility of them also going to their local doctor, the family doctor, or local hospital.
And I think there's some stuff around that, like there are VA centers all over the United States, and I think that if you have to be within so many miles of a VA center, and so if you can't get to that VA center, that you can utilize civilian services, if you will.
So yeah, that dynamic is changing. So I can't give a specific answer because I think it's changing as we move forward.
And actually, Matthew Queen had chimed in on the Q&A kind of to help answer some of those earlier questions. So thanks for chiming in. Regarding the hearing loss question, he said all disabilities the VA considers are or must be service related.
Okay.
says that I have hearing loss and get hearing aids, but the VA did not give me a disability rating for the loss because I did not see a physician for the hearing loss while I was on active duty. So
Okay.
thank you for chiming in.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so appreciate that.
And then also in regards to the referrals, he says that Veterans Choice is the method for all vets getting services outside of the VA system.
Okay, and like I said, I know that there had been a change of the VA, so thank you, Matt, for that shout out.
Yeah, definitely. And if anybody else has other things to chime in with, definitely feel free to pop those into the QA or the chat. We really appreciate you guys sharing resources. Okay, next question from Cynthia, wondering where can I find information regarding the Veterans Mental Health First Aid? You find that at the VA website.
That would be on mental health first aid. Or, if you Google search mental health first aid, it's mental National Council .org. There is the first aid stuff is on there for youth and for adult, and it's actually a certification underneath the adult certification. Yeah, it's like a subset.
So what's it again? I'm sorry.
It's part of the National Council. It's National Council or Mental Health National Council .org. But if you Google search mental health first aid, it'll come up.
Okay. Next question. For SC, what are specific things that the state VR can provide that VR&E does not provide? I'm having trouble figuring out complementary services to offer for a consumer who is working with VR&E aside from our vocational assessment.
I would think that the person needs to talk to the VR&E counselor first.
Yeah, I would talk to the VR&E counselor. I mean, they definitely need to be collaborating to make sure that, you know, what are they providing so that the state VR is not duplicating, because we don't want to duplicate services that VR&E is already providing. So there definitely needs to be some communication and collaboration there, not just assuming, you know.
Or the inverse, where their service is not being provided because they didn't talk with each other. So that would be our recommendation, is that whoever had that question, get permission obviously from the veteran that they're working with to find out who their VR&E counselor is and get permission to talk to that VR&E counselor.
Because it's just like, I know for state VR, we can have a case open with another state, but we can't provide the same services that they are in another state. So there has to be that communication piece to know what the other person is doing so that you're not double doing it.
Yeah, and actually these next two questions tie into the question we just discussed as well. So Sarah's asking if they can receive both VR&E benefits and state VR benefits simultaneously. And sounds like the answer is yes, as long as it's not the exact same service. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then Anna was wondering,
with that, I would also say I would make sure that you look at your local state policy. I mean, I know Pennsylvania, our policy allows for it, but I would just make sure that you're looking at your local state policies to make sure what all it says about dual cases like that.
Okay. And that comment also ties well into the next question. Anna's asking if there's a reference list to show what VR&E can pay for versus VR. And I'm wondering if that's different state to state.
Well, the federal program, I don't think there would be any change for the VR&E because it's a federal program. Now, what Kimberly was saying is at the state level, though, it could vary from state to state. So I would say find out what depending on your state, find out what the federal level is. It's going to remain the same state to state, but also depending on which state you're in, it could vary from what one state VR program is doing versus another.
And up here, I just went back the slide. So www.va.gov is the Veterans Administration, and you can look to see what services that they provide there. It has it all listed out.
Wonderful. All right, next question. Does a vet have to be service connected in order to receive VRNE? And if so, what percentage do they have to have?
I would have to say yes.
Yeah, there has to be some sort of
Some
service.
service-connected disability, but what the percentage is, I can't think of what it would be off the top of my head. So we might have to phone a friend on that one. So, but yeah, I know it's up above a certain percentage, but I'm not sure what that percentage is. So again.
And I think there has to be a certain amount of time. Like they couldn't have just gone into the military and then been discharged. Like there's definitely some.
There's some parameters, right? Yeah,
yeah.
Amount of time served.
Their DD 214 would
yeah.
have all that information on it.
So
would be where that information would be found is how much that time that they served. They would have to have that to be able to go probably apply for VR services, VRNE services.
So it sounds like there needs to be a little bit of investigative reporting done in regards to, finding what information the veteran themselves can provide, but also to, upon finding out what that is, taking next steps to get permission, or if the veteran's already contacted a VRNE counselor, they haven't, recommend that they do, so that they can find out directly.
Well, I know here locally at our career links or our one-stop shops or American Job Centers, we actually have a veteran rep in those facilities in those one-stop shops. So, maybe finding out who that person is in your one-stop shop and getting that connection, because they're going to probably be able to help you through these very detailed questions that you guys are having. That would be a really good resource to reach out to.
Well, also too, that brings up a good point. There's probably some workforce-related resources that are veteran-specific that we haven't talked about because we're focusing on VR
Mental health.
And mental health that may be available for that veteran as well. So again, that's another avenue for consideration.
And we did have several people chiming in to the Q&A say that, yes, it's a minimum of 10% service connected with an honorable.
That number was sticking in my head, but I wasn't certain, so I didn't want to say it. And then
yep. Well, you have, it looks like 4 or 5 people backing you up in the Q&A box. So,
okay.
So you can say that confidently now, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for chiming in. Just give me 1 second here to get to our next question. This is more of a comment coming from Beatrice saying, I work for the VA, but not regional, the health administration. It says we too offer Voc rehab services more so as a support system and assisting veterans return to work or school. We also offer in-house training and pay a stipend. She works closely with VRNE counselors to assist veterans return to work or school. Most people know their program as the compensated work therapy program. That's Get Therapy and enter their program for support. So thank you for chiming in with that comment.
Yes, thank you, Beatrice.
Okay, I'm trying to see, I have a lot of people chiming in with comments. Sorry, just give me a moment here to get my ducks in a row. Matthew just chiming in again saying the disability rating is irrelevant when it comes to the service from the VA. If a disability is rated at 10%, they get the same treatment for that disability as does the veteran with a 100% rating. VA centers in most communities can answer some of these more difficult questions as well if you contact them.
Yes.
And I want to emphasize that. Thank you again, Matt, for that shout out. But I want to emphasize that's what helps you in terms of knowing what resources are out there, is collaborating with your partners at the VA, for the VA collaborating with your partners in the state VR program, because we can't all do it ourselves. That's one thing that I talk about when I work with professionals from across disciplines, that in many ways these days we're tasked to doing everything for the individual, but it's just not real. We need to realize that we can do our scope, our colleagues that we are aware of can do their scope, and together we can provide the resources that are truly needed to meet the needs of the individual. So it's about collaboration as much as it is what you can bring to the table.